Hello everybody, welcome back to Screen Stars, welcome to another of my end of year top 10 lists, and today's list is the top 10 worst films of the year. Now of course with any top 10 list this is just subjective, this is my opinion. If you have enjoyed any of these films I'm going to mention on this list, that's great. I'm not here to point and laugh at films like that. I always appreciate filmmakers. They're more talented than me. I couldn't make a movie. I wouldn't know where to start. Not really. However, there have been some particularly challenging films to get through this year, I think it's fair to say. And this list consists of the worst offenders in my book. Now, it's not been a great year for cinema anyway, because we've not been able to go to the cinema for obvious reasons, but generally speaking I watch a combination of cinema movies, video on demand movies, screeners that I get sent, so I get a chance to see a lot of low budget films and things like that. So this list is a mixture of films you may have heard of, but there'll be certainly films on this list you will not have heard of. However, I have reviewed every single one of the films on this list. If you want to look through the channel you can find a more in-depth review if you are considering watching one of them, which I seriously suggest you probably don't, because none of them on this list are great. As always, there are some honourable and in this case dishonourable mentions, and there are three films that I would like to bring your attention to. And the first one is called Dead Earth, otherwise known as The Two of Us, I believe it is. And it's these two women who are in a relationship, who are living in a post-apocalyptic world that is overrun with zombies. It's just a really dull film, and it's just one I definitely don't recommend. The next two is Monstrous and Abominable. Both are Bigfoot movies in their own way, Sasquatch movies that are absolutely terrible, that I strongly avoid you don't watch. Monstrous and Abominable are both abominable. So, coming in at number 10 on my list is a film called Devil's Revenge. Now this film, when I first looked at it, looked quite attractive to me. It's got William Shatner in it, it's got Jerry Ryan from Star Trek as well, and the concept looked really good. And then I watched it, unfortunately, and it is just really tacky and bad. Poorly written, terrible plot devices and plot holes everywhere, and it's just a really terrible uninspired film with admittedly occasionally some decent effects going on, but it is just not a film I can recommend at all. It's just really quite bad. Coming in at number 9 is a film called Bloodhound. I watched this quite early in the year, I believe. It's a found footage film. Now if you know me and you know my channel, you know I am a fan of found footage films, so I was looking forward to actually checking this one out. And it's about this private investigator who's kind of looking for someone, and he ends up like going down this path of, like, you know, a ritual and human sacrifices, all this kind of stuff, and that all works really well, but there's that many plot holes in this film. It really ends up being really frustrating to watch, and it is definitely not one that I can recommend. Coming in at number 8 is a film called The Stalker, a particularly bad film that is very low budget, but it focuses on this family that head off somewhere to try and get away from this stalker who essentially follows them there, and there may well be a connection to their past. Again, and it's very low budget, granted, but it's just, there's no excuse I think for some of the things that go on in this film. It's just really poorly done, really badly written, terrible plot holes everywhere, bad acting, one to avoid. Coming in at number 7, Dolittle. Now I was really disappointed with this film. I went to the cinema to see it early in the year, looking forward to seeing Robert Downey Jr. I thought he was perfectly cast initially as Dolittle. And this film is probably quite a lot of fun for little ones out there, you know, about 5 or 6 years old maybe will probably enjoy this. I thought it was appalling. I thought it was unfunny. I thought the effects weren't very good. Robert Downey Jr. did this weird accent, Welsh accent, that just didn't work, I don't think, for the film, and it just wasn't an adventure that was interesting in any way to me, and I was really unhappy with it. Coming in at number 6 is The Craft Legacy. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I'm not like a super fan of the first Craft film, but it is a film I watched in the 90s and quite enjoyed, I suppose. This one is appalling in almost every way. It's quite obviously made with an agenda. It's one of those agenda films. Now, I don't normally buy into that sort of thing, but this was so woke, this film, so much of agenda pushed film, it slaps you across the face. It's possible to avoid, and it's just not good in any way, this film. Definitely avoid it. Coming in at number 5 is another low budget film called Subferatu. Clever title, and it's a horror comedy that focuses on this group of people that get pulled aboard this Nazi submarine that is infested with vampires. The premise sounds good, doesn't it? Unfortunately, the film fails to deliver. It's not funny, it's quite awkward, it's not scary, the acting's not brilliant at all, and it doesn't, all the things it's trying to do in the film, all the boxes it's trying to tick, unfortunately it doesn't tick any of them, so you can't really recommend it. Coming in at number 4 is a film called Clownery. Whew, this was a bad film. I think I reviewed this fairly recently on the channel, and it's about this young lady who has got this real fear of clowns, which stems from her childhood. It sounds promising so far, doesn't it? I promise you it's not when you watch it. Not scary, it's more psychological than anything. The effects for the clowns were pretty good, but the acting was arguably amongst the worst I've seen this year in a film, and it is definitely not a film that you want to be watching. Coming in at number 3, one of my most recent films that I've reviewed on the channel, Breach. What can I say about this film? Bruce Willis again sleepwalking through the whole film. Thomas Jane in a film he didn't need to be in, and it's like a sci-fi horror that is not scary. The effects aren't particularly good, the set design is really uninspired, and there is nothing original about this film at all in any way, shape or form, and it is definitely a really terrible movie. Coming in at number 2, Top Gunner. Sounds a good one, doesn't it? Yeah, no surprise here, it's terrible. It's an asylum film, and I know you shouldn't expect anything less, but I'm almost like a moth to a flame when it comes to asylum films sometimes. The curiosity generally gets the better of me, and this was obviously released because they were thinking that the new Top Gun film were coming out this year and they were going to ride the wave of that film. Well, they couldn't do that, they just had to release it on its own merits. It's got Eric Roberts in it, unfortunately, and it's as bad as you can imagine it is. It is really, really bad. My worst film of the year, I was about to say streets ahead of the rest, but it's not in regards to the score I gave it. It's very similar score to the ones I give other films on this list. But the reason why this is number 1 is because it is just an appallingly done film, with actors in it like Nicolas Cage, Frank Grillo, Tony Jaa, and even Alain Mousse. Some talented people in this film, whether they be actors or martial artists, and they did nothing with any of them interesting at all, and it just turns out to be a really crap, cheap, awful Predator ripoff. And it's probably the film I struggled to get through most this year, and I have really seen some quite poor films, so definitely I think it deserves the number 1 spot this year. So there you go, guys, that is my top 10 list of the worst films of the year, in my opinion. But I guarantee you, any of you watching this list and wondering if any of these films are worth checking out, trust me, they aren't. They really aren't, and they definitely aren't worth buying. If you get the opportunity to watch it for free, maybe watch it and have a laugh at some of them, but they are all pretty bad in their own right, and I think the top 3 in particular stand out to me as the worst films. But I think every single one of these on this list scored 4 out of 10 or below But I didn't necessarily put them in the order of what I scored them, because there were some on this list that are further up on the list that got, I think, 2.5 out of 10 or something like that. But that might have been like The Stalker. That was quite a very low budget film, so I didn't punish that as harshly as something like Breach or Jiu-Jitsu or others on the list that would have had a bigger budget and bigger expectations because of the performers that were in it. So I don't always put them on the list by what score they get. Anyway, I'd love to hear in the comments what your least favourite films of the year are. And of course I will be back with my next top 10 list, hopefully in a week or so, of my favourite films of the year. And it has been a difficult year for really top-notch films, because we haven't got our usual blockbuster movies of the year, our summer popcorn film movies, and a lot of movies have been held back obviously until next year, but there has still been some good films in there. So you can look forward to that list. So thanks for watching, everybody. I will be back very shortly with more content on the channel.